When most people picture World War II, they think of tanks rumbling through Europe, fighter planes dogfighting in the sky, and soldiers storming beaches under gunfire. What they don't think about is pigeons. But for a small group of overlooked heroes, pigeons were the most powerful weapon they had, and your entire job was to take care of them. You weren't a general, you weren't a fighter pilot, you were a pigeon handler. And guess what? Your life kinda sucked. Because while the pigeons got medals, you got the mess. Let's start with the basics. During World War II, communication was everything. Armies needed to send messages across battlefields, behind enemy lines, and from ships at sea. But phones could be tapped, radios could be jammed, wires could be cut. Sometimes the only way to get a message through was to send it on wings. So militaries around the world, including the British, Americans, Germans, and the French, turned to the oldest message delivery system in the book: homing pigeons. These birds had one simple job: fly home. So every handler's job was to train them, feed them, shelter them, and make sure they always knew where home was. Sounds cute, right? Well, it wasn't. It meant you lived surrounded by coops, bird poop, and the constant smell of feathers, sweat, and moldy grain. You weren't stationed on the front line, but you might be based in a muddy camp, a cold barn, or the back of a moving tank, with nothing but squawking birds to keep you company. And you had to take care of hundreds of them, feed them by hand, clean up after them, train them daily, patch up their injuries, chase them down if they escaped, and hope, pray, they didn't get eaten by rats, foxes, or enemy snipers. Yes, snipers sometimes shot pigeons on purpose, because they knew that a single bird could carry battle-changing intelligence. So every pigeon you trained was a little feathered soldier, and if one died, it wasn't just a bird. It meant hundreds of troops getting ambushed, or an entire operation failing. And if the mission failed, that was on you. No pressure. Let's talk about how you sent them out. If you were stationed on a battlefield or behind enemy lines, you had to carry the pigeons in cages, sometimes strapped to your back, sometimes hidden in vehicles or crates. When the time came, you'd scribble down a message, place it in a tiny capsule, attach it to the bird's leg, and release it into the sky. Then you waited. Sometimes the bird flew 50 miles, sometimes 300, through bombs, bullets, and storms, over enemy territory, past hawks, machine guns, and flak cannons. But sometimes, it never came back. You didn't know if it was shot, blown out of the air, eaten, or just lost. So you trained more pigeons, every day, repeating the same exhausting routine, hoping one would survive when it mattered most. And the irony? The pigeons got more respect than you did. Several birds, like the famous Chirami, who served 194 men in World War I, were given medals, memorials, and even military burials. Some were named official war heroes. One pigeon, G.I. Joe, even received the Dickin Medal, the animal version of the Victoria Cross, for saving over 1,000 lives in Italy by delivering a message just in time to stop an Allied bombing on friendly troops. And you? You were invisible. No medals, no parades, no statues. You were just the handler. The one who scrubbed the cages, fought off lice, carried seed sacks, and stayed up all night when a bird got sick. If the bird succeeded, it was the hero. If it failed, you were the failure. Let's talk about disease. Handling pigeons all day meant you were constantly exposed to mites, lice, and pigeon-borne illnesses like psittacosis, also known as parrot fever. It gave you flu-like symptoms, pneumonia, and could kill you if untreated. Not to mention the endless coughing, itching, and sneezing from living in a cloud of dust and feathers. Oh, and the poop. There was so much poop. You had to clean it off crates, uniforms, food bags, even yourself. It got under your nails, in your mouth, in your hair. Every morning started with scraping dried pigeon crap off wood and metal, usually with your bare hands. And yet, you couldn't complain. You were part of the war machine, a tiny, forgotten gear. If you got sick or quit, they just found another handler. Some poor farm kid who knew animals or had experience with chickens. Congratulations! Now you were in charge of 200 high-stakes feathered messengers. And don't forget, this wasn't a safe job either. If you were in the field, you moved with the front lines. This meant sleeping in trenches, eating moldy rations, dodging air raids, and hiding your pigeons during shellings. Some handlers died from exposure, others from shrapnel. Some were captured and interrogated. Where are the birds? What were they carrying? Because yes, even the Nazis knew pigeons were dangerous. And when your birds returned from a mission, you didn't celebrate. You intercepted them at the loft, removed the message, handed it to an officer, and went back to cleaning droppings and feeding the next batch. The birds got rest. You didn't. Maybe the worst part of all? You grew attached. You named them. You talked to them. You knew their personalities. Some were bold, some were skittish, some would nuzzle your hand, and you knew not all of them would come back. And every time you opened a cage door, part of you wondered, will this one die today? When one didn't return, it hurt. Not just because of the mission, but because you cared. They were your friends, the only ones who listened, the only ones who didn't yell or bark orders, the only ones who didn't treat you like garbage. But you couldn't show that. You had to act like it was nothing. Another bird, another mission, another pile of feathers gone with the wind. So, to recap, you lived surrounded by poop, disease, and noise. You worked long hours for no recognition. The birds were constantly at risk, and so were you. You were forgotten by history, even though lives depended on you. And the animals you trained get more praise and honor than you ever would. That's why your life as a World War II pigeon handler sucked. You weren't just feeding birds, you were holding a fragile thread of communication, one wing beat away from victory or disaster. You weren't called a hero. You were sent home with calloused hands, scarred lungs, and a head full of cooing ghosts. No one remembered the handler, but history remembers the pigeons. And that's all you ever were, the person behind the wings. Forgotten, but essential.